What if I told you that designing your dream tank top is easier than you think? Join me as we walk through the entire process of drafting a knit or stretchy fabric tank top pattern. No gatekeeping here. Trust the process. You'll thank me later. Gather your tools and let's get started. Here is the key body measurements you need for the top. Now we need to figure out how much ease we need in the top. Since tank tops are usually sewn in stretchy fabrics, we need negative ease. Negative ease is essential in knit or stretchy fabric because stretchy fabrics naturally stretch and recover. Without negative ease, your garment will look baggy instead of sleek and fitted. So in this case, I will subtract 1 inch from the circumference measurement. The amount you subtract is dependent on how stretchy your fabric is. So in some cases, you would need to subtract more or less. If you want a detailed video on how much you need to subtract from a stretchy fabric when cutting, comment detail below. Now let's start drafting the pattern. You can begin with a simple bodice block. If you don't have one yet, don't worry. I'll walk you through the exact steps. But if you want to learn how to draft a basic bodice block, I have a detailed video on the channel. I'll link it up here in the card and in the description below. In this tutorial, I'll be drafting the full front of the pattern. Then for the back too, I'll be drafting the full back of the pattern. So I'll use half of the bust circumference plus the necessary seam allowance I will need for the front. Then I'll do the same for the back. The side facing me is the center front or the folded edge of the paper. From the top of the paper, I'll leave about 1 inch before drawing a line which I'll use as my shoulder guideline. So on the shoulder guideline, I'll measure and mark my neck width measurement, which in this case I'm using 3 inches. So I'll measure and mark 3 inches. Then for the depth of the neck, I'll also use 3 inches. So 3 by 3. Then I'll draw the neck curve just like so. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's build this community together. So on the shoulder guideline, I'll measure and mark 2 inches to use as my shoulder measurement. Then from the 2 inches mark, go down by half an inch to create the shoulder slope for the top. Join the slope mark to the tip of the neck to create the shoulder slope line just like so. Now from the shoulder slope mark, measure and mark the armhole measurement, which in this case is 8 inches. So I'll measure and mark 8 inches like so. Draw a straight line to use as your chest guideline. Join the shoulder slope line to the chest line with a straight line like so. So on the chest guideline, I'll measure and mark the bust circumference I am using, which in this case I am using 8 inches. Now on the armhole line, I'll look for the midpoint, then go in by half an inch to create the armhole curve. So I'll join the bust measurement on the chest line to the half inch mark you've created to the shoulder slope line, just like so. Now from the shoulder, measure and mark the top length measurement, which in this case I'm using 17 inches. So I'll measure and mark 17 inches and draw a line to use as my waist guideline or the top length measurement. On the top length line. Measure and mark 1/4 of your waist minus the negative ease, which is 1 inch. So in this case, I'm using 5.5 inches. So I'll measure and mark 5.5 inches on the top length line, just like so. Join this mark to the armhole or the chest line. Now go ahead and add all the necessary seam allowance you will need for the top. So in this case, I added 1 inch for the hem of the top, then 1/2 inch all around the top to create the seam allowance line. So I'm using red pen to draw the seam allowance lines, just like so. After adding all the necessary seam allowance, go ahead and cut the front part of the club top. The front part of your pattern is ready. Go ahead and label it with the pattern name, size, and cutting instructions. Now let's go ahead and draft the back part of the club top. So we will start with a folded paper just as we did for the front, because we want to create the full back of the top. Now leave about 1 inch from the top of the paper and draw a line to use as your shoulder guideline. Now we need to create the back neck curve. So on the shoulder guideline, we will measure and mark the neck width measurement, which in this case we are using 3 inches. So I'll measure and mark 3 inches on the shoulder line. Then from the shoulder line, I'll measure down 1.5 inches for the neck depth. Then draw a curve to create the back neck curve, just like so. Now on the shoulder guideline, from the tip of the neck width, measure and mark 2 inches to create the shoulder of the top. Now from the shoulder, go down by 1/2 inch to create the shoulder slope for the top. Now from the shoulder slope mark, measure down 8 inches to create the chest guideline. Join the chest guideline to the shoulder slope line to create the armhole line. So on the chest line, measure and mark 1/4 of the bust circumference measurement, which in this case is 7.75. So I'll measure and mark 7.75 on the chest guideline. Now on the armhole line, look for the midpoint of the armhole line. Then go in by 3 inches to create the design at the back of the top. Join the shoulder slope line to the 3 inches mark, then to the chest line where the bust measurement is, to create the curve for the back part of the top. Now we need the length of the top. So from the shoulder, measure down 17 inches and draw a line to use as the length of the top. On the top length line, measure and mark 1/4 of your waist circumference minus the ease. So in this case, it's 5.5 inches. So on the top length line, I'll measure and mark 5.5 inches. Join the length line to the chest line like so. You can use the straight side of your ruler to create this line. Now, add the necessary seam allowance you need for the top, which in this case, I'm using 1 inch for the hem of the top, then ½ inch for the side seam and armhole, then the next side of the top too. After adding all the necessary seam allowance, go ahead and cut the back part of the top too. Be sure to label your back part with the name of the pattern, cutting instructions, After cutting the front and the back, this is how your pattern will look like. So if this is the wrong side of your fabric, you join it like this, then you sew on the seam allowance lines. Join the shoulder, then the side seam, then the other side seam, then you fold your hem nicely. You fold it one, then you fold it again to create the hem of the top. Was this video helpful? If it was, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more easy sewing and pattern drafting tutorials. Check out the description for a skirt pattern you can pair with this top. See you in my next video. Bye bye for now.